My father died on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Vanessa had changed the locks on the penthouse. I found out when I tried to use my key to pick up some of my father's personal effects, his watch collection, the photo albums from when my mother was still alive, the leather journal he'd kept since I was born. The key slid into the lock but wouldn't turn. I tried again, thinking maybe I'd grabbed the wrong key. But no, the locks had been changed. I called Vanessa. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice crisp and businesslike. The penthouse is part of the estate now, Melissa. Everything needs to stay exactly as it is until probate is complete. I'm sure you understand. I just want Dad's personal items, things that belong to him. Everything belonged to him, which means everything now goes through the proper legal channels. I've been advised by my attorney not to allow anyone access until the will has been read and the estate settled. Your attorney? Dad's been dead for 48 hours, which is precisely why I need to protect his assets. You'd be surprised how quickly things can disappear during estate settlements. I'm just being prudent. She hung up. I stood in the hallway of the building where I'd grown up, staring at the door that no longer opened for me, and felt the first cold touch of real fear. My father, James Hartley, had purchased the penthouse in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood in 1998, 2 years after my mother died. It was his sanctuary, his fortress against grief. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, 3 bedrooms, a study lined with first edition books, a kitchen he'd learned to cook in after Mom was gone, because he refused to let me grow up on takeout. He'd married Vanessa 4 years ago, when I was 26 and he was 62. She was 45, elegant, well-educated, charming when she wanted to be. She worked in public relations for a pharmaceutical company, wore designer suits, and always knew exactly what to say at my father's business dinners. I'd been cautiously optimistic. My father had been alone for so long. If Vanessa made him happy, I could accept her. But there had been small things. The way she'd suggested he update his will, now that he was remarried. The way she'd slowly replaced my mother's artwork with pieces she'd selected. The way she'd started referring to the penthouse as our place, within months of the wedding, casually mentioning its value at family gatherings. Did you know the penthouse is worth nearly $4 million now? James bought it for just under $1 million. Incredible investment. My father had brushed off my concerns. Vanessa's just practical-minded. She understands finance. Your mother never cared about those things. She cared about art and music and beauty. Vanessa's different, but that doesn't make her mercenary. Now he was gone. Massive heart attack in his office, dead before the ambulance arrived. And I was locked out of the home, where I'd spent every Sunday dinner for the past 14 years. The funeral was on Saturday. Vanessa wore black Prada, and accepted condolences with the perfect balance of grief and dignity. She'd planned everything, the service, the flowers, the reception afterward at the university club. She'd even written the obituary, which mentioned her prominently and me in a single line, survived by his daughter Melissa. At the reception, I overheard her talking to my father's business partner, Gerald Kowalski. James was so meticulous about his estate planning. Everything is very clearly laid out. The transition should be seamless. I'm glad to hear it, Gerald said. Jim always said he wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Oh, he took care of everything. The penthouse, the investment accounts, the life insurance. He made sure I'd be comfortable. She didn't mention me at all. I approached them, and Vanessa's expression shifted to something approximating sympathy. Melissa, sweetheart, how are you holding up? I'd like to talk about the penthouse. About getting my things. Of course. Once the estate is settled, we'll arrange a time for you to collect your personal items. I promise I won't keep anything that's rightfully yours. When is the will being read? My attorney is handling all of that. I'll make sure you're notified of the details. Gerald looked between us, sensing tension but too polite to comment. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I locked myself in a stall, and tried to breathe through the panic. My father's attorney was Thomas Brennan, a man who'd handled my father's legal affairs for 20 years. I'd met him dozens of times at various events. After the reception, I called his office and left a message asking him to contact me about the estate. He called back Monday morning. Melissa, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man and a good friend. Thank you, Tom. I was hoping you could tell me when the will reading is scheduled. There was a pause. I'm not handling the estate. What? Your father changed attorneys about 18 months ago. A firm called Whitmore and Associates is handling everything now. I only found out when Vanessa's attorney contacted me asking for copies of the old estate documents. Why would he change attorneys? He trusted you. I don't know. He never discussed it with me. I have to admit, my feelings were a bit hurt, but people change lawyers for various reasons. I assumed Vanessa had referred him to someone she'd worked with. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and felt the situation crystallize into something worse than I'd imagined. Vanessa hadn't just moved quickly, she'd been planning this for months. Getting my father to change attorneys, updating his will, positioning herself to control everything. I called Whitmore and Associates. The receptionist was polite but unhelpful. "I'm sorry, but we can't discuss the details of an estate with anyone other than the named executor. If you have questions, you'll need to contact Mrs. Hartley. I'm his daughter." "I understand, but our instructions are very clear. The formal will reading is scheduled for next Friday at 10 a.m. You should receive a written notice in the mail." The notice arrived Wednesday, formal typed on law firm letterhead. "You are hereby notified that the last will and testament of James Edward Hartley, deceased, will be read on Friday, November 17, 2024, at 10 a.m., at the offices of Whitmore and Associates, 200 North LaSalle Street, Suite 4200, Chicago, Illinois. Your attendance is requested but not required." I called my father's accountant, Richard Morrison. He'd prepared my father's taxes for 15 years, and might have insight into the financial situation. "Richard, it's Melissa Hartley. I'm trying to understand my father's estate situation. Do you have any information about how his assets were structured?" Richard sighed. "Melissa, I stopped working with your father about a year ago. He said Vanessa had found someone who specialized in estate tax planning, and they were going to handle everything going forward. Did that seem strange to you?" "Honestly, yes. Your father's finances weren't complicated. He didn't need specialized estate planning. But it wasn't my place to question his decisions." "Did you ever see any of the new documents? Updated wills, trusts, anything?" "No. I prepared his final tax return last April, and that was the last time we communicated professionally. Every avenue I pursued hit the same wall. Vanessa had systematically isolated my father from his old advisors, replacing them with people she controlled or influenced. Friday morning, I arrived at Whitmore and Associates at 9:45. The reception area was all glass and chrome, expensive minimalist furniture, a view of the Chicago River 42 stories below. Vanessa arrived at 9:55, accompanied by a man in a charcoal suit who introduced himself as her personal attorney, David Carpenter. She smiled at me, cool and professional. "Melissa, I'm glad you could make it." We were shown into a conference room. Two attorneys from Whitmore and Associates entered, a senior partner named Harrison Whitmore and a younger associate, carrying a file box. Harrison began with the standard legal preamble about the will, the probate process, and the role of the executor. Then he opened the document. The last will and testament of James Edward Hartley, executed on March 14, 2024, 8 months ago, less than a year before his death. Harrison read through the formal language, and then reached the substantive provisions. "To my beloved wife Vanessa Hartley, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to the Penthouse residence, located at 1200 Lakeshore Drive, Unit 42A. All investment accounts held at Morgan Stanley, the life insurance policy through Northwestern Mutual in the amount of $2 million, all personal property, furnishings, artwork and collectibles, and any other assets not specifically mentioned herein." My stomach dropped. Harrison continued, "To my daughter Melissa Ann Hartley, I leave my collection of vintage wristwatches and the photo albums containing family photographs, with the hope that these items will help her remember our time together." Watches and photo albums. Out of an estate worth millions, I was getting watches and photo albums. Vanessa's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slightest hint of satisfaction around her eyes. Furthermore, Harrison read, "I appoint my wife Vanessa Hartley as the sole executor of this will, with full authority to manage, sell or distribute the assets of the estate as she sees fit." The room felt like it was tilting. My father had cut me out, not completely, that would have looked suspicious, but effectively. The penthouse, the investments, everything of real value went to Vanessa. "Are there any questions?" Harrison asked. I found my voice. "When was this will executed?" "March 14, 2024, as I mentioned." "Where's the previous will?" "The one before this." Harrison glanced at Vanessa, then back to me. Previous wills are superseded by later wills. This is the operative document. I'd like to see the previous will. That's not how this works, Miss Hartley. The current will is the only legally relevant document. Vanessa spoke for the first time. Melissa, I know this must be difficult. Your father and I discussed this extensively. He wanted to make sure I'd be taken care of, and he knew you were established in your career, financially independent. He was very proud of you. He left me watches and photo albums, sentimental items he thought you'd value. He knew you weren't materialistic. I looked at her across the conference table, at her perfectly composed face, her expensive suit, her manicured hands folded calmly. She'd won. She'd maneuvered my father into changing his will, changing his attorneys, changing his entire support system, and now she had everything. I'd like to contest the will, I said. Harrison Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. Miss Hartley, that's certainly your right, but I should inform you that will contests are difficult, expensive, and rarely successful. You'd need to prove undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity, fraud, or some other specific legal grounds. From what I've seen, this will was properly executed. Your father was of sound mind, and how do you know he was of sound mind? Did you personally witness the execution? I did, yes, along with 2 other witnesses, all of whom can testify that your father understood exactly what he was signing. Vanessa's attorney, David Carpenter, spoke up. Miss Hartley, I understand you're upset, but making accusations won't change the situation. Your father made his wishes clear. If you choose to contest the will, you'll be spending years in litigation with very little chance of success, and you'll destroy any remaining family relationship in the process. What family relationship? She locked me out of my father's home 2 days after he died, to preserve the estate, Vanessa said smoothly. As executor, I have a legal responsibility to protect the assets. I stood up. I need some air. I walked out of the conference room, down the hallway, and found a bathroom. I locked myself in a stall, and tried not to cry. My father was gone. The penthouse was gone. Everything was gone. But then I thought about something my father had said to me years ago, after my mother died, and the lawyers were handling her small estate. Lawyers tell you what you need to hear, not always what you want to hear. Always read the documents yourself. I left the bathroom, and returned to the conference room. Everyone was still there, packing up their files. I'd like a copy of the will, I said. Harrison nodded. Of course, we'll mail you a certified copy within the week. I'd like it now. He hesitated, then instructed his associate to make copies. While we waited, Vanessa made small talk about arrangements for collecting the watches and photo albums, as if we were discussing borrowed lawn equipment rather than my father's entire legacy. The associate returned with the copies. I took mine and left without saying goodbye. I read the will 10 times that night. Then I started researching Illinois probate law, estate planning, undue influence standards, testamentary capacity requirements. I read until 3 in the morning, making notes, highlighting sections, trying to find something, anything, that could help me. The next morning, I called Thomas Brennan again. Tom, I need to hire you. I want to contest the will. Melissa, I have to be honest with you. Will contests are extremely difficult. The burden of proof is on you, and it's a high bar. You'd need to show that Vanessa somehow coerced your father, or that he wasn't mentally competent, and from what I knew of Jim, he was sharp right up until the end. She isolated him from everyone who knew him. She got him to change attorneys, change accountants, update his will to leave her everything. That has to count for something. It's suspicious, yes, but suspicion isn't evidence. Did your father ever say anything to you about feeling pressured? Did he express concerns about Vanessa? Did anyone witness her threatening him or manipulating him? No, he seemed happy. He said she was good for him. Then I don't know what we'd argue in court. I'm sorry, Melissa. I know this isn't what you want to hear. I thanked him, and hung up. Then I sat in my apartment, and tried to accept that I'd lost. Vanessa had been too careful, too thorough. She'd covered every angle. My phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Hartley, this is Patricia Simmons. I'm an attorney with Simmons and Grant. I worked with your father on some estate planning matters, and I wonder if we could meet to discuss the will. I sat up straight. You worked with my father. Not recently. About 3 years ago before he remarried, but I have some information that might be relevant to the current situation. Would you be available to meet this afternoon? Patricia Simmons' office was in a modest building in the Loop. Nothing like the glass tower where Whitmore and Associates operated. She was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Thank you for seeing me," I said. "Of course. I heard about your father's passing. I'm very sorry." She pulled out a file. "Your father came to me in 2021, about a year before he married Vanessa. He wanted to update his estate plan. At that time, he had a very straightforward will, leaving everything to you. But he was concerned about what would happen if he remarried. He talked to you about Vanessa, not by name, but he said he was dating someone and was considering marriage, and he wanted to make sure that if he did remarry, you would still be protected. So we created an irrevocable trust." My heart started pounding. "A trust?" "Yes. He transferred the penthouse into an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The trust was designed so that even if he changed his will later, even if he remarried and wanted to leave assets to a spouse, the penthouse would be protected and would pass directly to you outside of probate." "Why didn't you represent him when he changed his will?" "He never told me he was changing his will. The last time I spoke with him was about 6 months after the trust was created. He seemed happy with the arrangement, and said he felt secure knowing you'd always have the penthouse." "Does Vanessa know about this trust?" "That I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is that the trust is valid, properly executed, and irrevocable, which means the penthouse isn't part of your father's probate estate. It doesn't matter what his will says about the penthouse. He didn't own it anymore. The trust did, and the trust names you as the beneficiary." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Do you have proof of this?" Patricia slid documents across the desk. "The original trust agreement, signed and notarized, the deed transferring the penthouse from your father's name to the trust, the certificate of trust, everything you need." I picked up the documents with shaking hands. There it was, in my father's signature, dated May 12, 2021. "James Edward Hartley, as grantor, hereby establishes the Hartley Family Irrevocable Trust for the benefit of Melissa Ann Hartley." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I saw the notice in the legal newspaper about the will reading. I knew the will couldn't leave the penthouse to Vanessa, because your father no longer owned it. But I also knew that if Whitmore and Associates was handling the probate, they either didn't know about the trust, or were deliberately ignoring it. Either way, you needed to know. What do I do now?" "You file a claim in probate court asserting your ownership of the penthouse through the trust. You provide these documents. The court will recognize that the penthouse wasn't part of the probate estate. Vanessa's will means nothing with regard to the penthouse. Your father couldn't leave her something he didn't own. She's not going to accept this. She doesn't have to accept it. It's not a matter of acceptance, it's a matter of law. The trust is ironclad." I hired Patricia on the spot. She prepared the necessary filings, and we submitted them to probate court on Monday morning. We also sent copies to Whitmore and Associates and to Vanessa directly. The response was immediate. David Carpenter, Vanessa's attorney, called me within 2 hours. "Miss Hartley, this alleged trust is extremely concerning. We need to verify its authenticity before proceeding." "Verify all you want. It's authentic." Patricia Simmons prepared it. My father signed it. It was properly recorded with the county. "The penthouse is mine. This is highly irregular. If such a trust existed, why wasn't it mentioned during the estate planning process with Whitmore and Associates?" "That's a question you should ask them, or ask Vanessa. Maybe she knew about it, and conveniently forgot to mention it." "These are serious allegations. These are serious facts. My father protected the penthouse before he married your client. Whatever will he signed later, doesn't change that." He hung up. An hour later, Vanessa called me directly. Her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "What exactly are you trying to pull?" "I'm not pulling anything. I'm claiming what my father left me in a legally binding trust. That trust is fraudulent. I've never seen it before, never heard your father mention it." "Of course you haven't, because he created it specifically to protect the penthouse from you. He knew what you were, Vanessa, even 3 years ago, before he married you, he knew. Your father left everything to me. He wanted me to have the penthouse. He couldn't leave you the penthouse. He didn't own it anymore. It belonged to the trust, and the trust names me as the sole beneficiary. I'll fight this. I'll prove that trust is fake." Patricia Simmons is prepared to testify. The notary is prepared to testify. The county recording office has the original documents. "You can fight all you want, but you're going to lose." She was silent for a long moment. "Then he never loved you the way he loved me. You were just a reminder of his dead wife. I made him happy in his final years. I deserve that penthouse. You deserve whatever a jury decides you deserve when the fraud investigation is complete. What fraud investigation? The one I'm requesting. You systematically isolated my father from his advisors, changed his attorneys without their knowledge, got him to execute a will leaving you assets he didn't own, and locked me out of the property 2 days after his death. That's going to look very interesting to a probate judge. I hung up. The next few weeks were a blur of legal filings, depositions, and arguments. Vanessa's attorneys demanded handwriting analysis of the trust documents. They got it. My father's signature was authentic. They demanded testimony from the witnesses who'd signed the trust. Patricia produced them. They argued the trust was invalid because my father had continued paying property taxes and living in the penthouse. Patricia explained that was exactly how this type of trust worked. The grantor could continue using the property, but legal ownership had transferred. Every argument Vanessa made fell apart under scrutiny. The probate judge scheduled a hearing for December 15th. I arrived at the courthouse with Patricia, my stomach in knots. Vanessa sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, with David Carpenter and Harrison Whitmore, her face a mask of controlled fury. The judge reviewed the documents, asked a few clarifying questions, and then delivered his ruling. The court finds that the Hartley family irrevocable trust was properly executed and legally valid. The penthouse located at 1200 Lakeshore Drive, Unit 42A, is not part of the decedent's probate estate, and passes directly to the named beneficiary, Melissa Ann Hartley, by operation of the trust. The will's provision purporting to leave the penthouse to Vanessa Hartley is void as to that specific asset. As the decedent had no legal authority to dispose of property he did not own. He looked at Vanessa. Mrs. Hartley, as executor of the estate, you are hereby ordered to deliver all keys, access codes, and possession of the penthouse property to Miss Melissa Hartley within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges. Vanessa stood up. Your Honor, this is a miscarriage of justice. My husband wanted me to have that property. Your husband transferred the property into an irrevocable trust 3 years before his death. Whatever his subsequent will said is irrelevant to property he no longer owned. The ruling stands. This hearing is adjourned. 48 hours later, I stood outside the penthouse door, with Patricia and a locksmith. Vanessa's attorney had delivered the keys that morning via courier, along with a curt note, stating that Vanessa had already removed her personal property, and would not be contesting the ruling further. I slid the key into the lock. This time, it turned. The door opened, and I stepped into my father's home. Our home. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. The leather sofa where my father had read the Sunday papers. The built-in bookshelves filled with first editions. The Steinway piano my mother had played. The view of Lake Michigan stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Vanessa had taken her things, her clothes, her artwork, the modern furniture she'd insisted on adding, but she'd left my father's life intact. Maybe out of spite, maybe because she realized taking it would invite more legal scrutiny. I walked through the room slowly. In the study I found my father's desk, exactly as he'd left it. His reading glasses, his fountain pen, a legal pad with notes in his handwriting, and underneath the pad, a sealed envelope with my name on it. I opened it with shaking hands. Dearest Melissa, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found your way back to the penthouse. I'm sorry for the confusion and pain you've likely experienced. I knew Vanessa would try to claim everything, which is why I worked with Patricia to protect the penthouse before I married her. You might wonder why I married her at all, knowing what she was. The truth is, I was lonely. Your mother's death left a hole I never fully filled. Vanessa was charming, intelligent, and made me feel less alone. I knew she cared more about my money than about me, but I made a choice to accept that in exchange for companionship. But I never forgot who really mattered. You are my daughter, my legacy, the best thing I ever did with my life. The penthouse is yours because you earned it, through every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every moment you showed up when I needed you. I know Vanessa will have manipulated my will. I know she'll claim I left her everything. Don't believe it. The penthouse was never hers to take. I made sure of that. Patricia has all the documents. Trust her, and trust yourself. I love you more than you'll ever know. Dad. I sat at his desk and cried. For him, for the years we'd lost, for the manipulation he'd endured, but also for his wisdom, his foresight, his absolute clarity about what mattered most. He'd known, even when he seemed happy with Vanessa, even when he'd changed his will and appeared to give her everything, he'd known, and he'd protected me anyway. 3 months later, I sold my apartment and moved into the penthouse full-time. I kept most of my father's furniture, adding a few pieces of my own. I set up a home office in the spare bedroom and started working remotely 2 days a week, enjoying the lake view my father had loved. Vanessa got the investment accounts and the life insurance, about $3 million total. More than enough to live comfortably, but not the penthouse. Never the penthouse. I heard through my father's business partner Gerald that she'd moved to Arizona, remarried within 6 months, and was telling everyone she'd walked away from the Chicago property because she couldn't bear the memories. The truth was simpler. She'd tried to steal it and lost. One Sunday afternoon, I was sitting on the balcony, watching sailboats drift across Lake Michigan, when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia Simmons holding a bottle of wine. "I was in the neighborhood," she said. "Thought I'd see how you're settling in." We sat on the balcony, drinking wine, and watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "Why did you really help me?" I asked. "You could have stayed out of it. Let Vanessa take everything." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Your father was a good man. When he came to me about the trust, he was very clear about his wishes. He said, 'I want to make sure that no matter what happens, no matter who I marry, or what I do later, Melissa gets the penthouse. It's her inheritance from her mother too. We bought it together after she died, as a way to move forward. I won't let anyone take that from her.'" She looked at me. "He knew you'd need protection, and he made sure you got it." We sat in comfortable silence, as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the city lights began to sparkle in the growing darkness. My father had been gone for months, but his presence filled every room of this place. His books, his music, his furniture, his careful planning. He'd loved me enough to protect me from his own mistakes, to build legal walls around what mattered most. The penthouse was mine, not because I'd fought Vanessa in court, but because my father had fought for me years before the battle even began. And every time I walked through that door, every time I looked out at the lake he'd loved, I felt his love protecting me still. The ocean view from my grandmother's beachfront house had always been spectacular. 3 bedrooms, wraparound deck, direct beach access, worth about $800,000 in today's market, maybe more. I'd inherited it 2 years ago when she passed, along with a trust fund she'd quietly built over 40 years of careful investments. Nobody in the family knew about the trust. They just knew I was struggling with credit card debt and a job that barely covered my apartment rent in the city. That's what I let them see. My cousin Marcus saw opportunity. "Listen, I'm trying to help you here," he'd said 3 months ago at a family barbecue. "That beach house is just sitting there. You can't afford the property taxes. You can't afford the maintenance. I know a guy who'd take it off your hands. Cash deal, close in 60 days. I'd stirred my iced tea. "I don't know, Marcus. You don't know." He laughed, loud enough for others to hear. "You're drowning in debt. The bank's probably going to take it anyway. At least this way you walk away with something." My Aunt Linda chimed in. "Marcus has really developed an eye for real estate. He flipped 2 properties last year. 3, Marcus corrected. Made 40 grand on the last one." I watched him pitch his help to me while Uncle Robert nodded approvingly, and my mother wrung her hands with worry. They all believed the story I'd carefully constructed. The late payments, the collection calls, the financial stress. The truth was different. Grandmother's trust fund generated about $12,000 monthly in dividend income. The beach house was paid off, held in an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. The property taxes were automatically paid from the trust. I visited every other weekend, kept it maintained, enjoyed the peace. But I let Marcus think he was rescuing me. "What's your guy offering?" I asked. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed me some numbers. 500,000, cash, quick close. The house was worth at least 800,000. He was planning to flip it for 300,000 profit, minimum. "I need to think about it," I said. "Think fast," Marcus replied. "This buyer's looking at other properties." Over the next month, he increased the pressure. Calls every few days, texts about last chance opportunities. He brought it up at my father's birthday dinner, at my sister's baby shower, at Sunday brunch, always with the family watching, always positioning himself as the successful businessman trying to save his struggling cousin. My mother finally pulled me aside after church one Sunday. Honey, maybe you should listen to Marcus. He knows what he's doing. You can't keep that house. It's too much for you. I nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Marcus nearly jumped when I called him that afternoon. Smart decision. I'll have my guy draw up the papers. Your guy? The buyer. Well, technically I'm buying it through my LLC, then selling to him. Standard practice, cleaner that way. So he wasn't even hiding it. He was going to buy my property for $500,000 and immediately flip it for $800,000 or more. Okay, I said simply. The paperwork came within days. Purchase agreement for $500,000. Closing date set for 45 days out. Marcus's LLC listed as the buyer. I read every page carefully in my apartment. Then I made some calls. First to my grandmother's estate attorney, James Morrison, who'd been managing the trust since her death. James, I need you to attend a real estate closing for me. Of course. What's the situation? I explained Marcus's plan. James was quiet for a moment. And the property is held in the irrevocable trust your grandmother established. Yes, with me as sole beneficiary and trustee. So you have the authority to sell, but any sale would require proper disclosure of the trust ownership to the title company. Exactly. And your cousin doesn't know about the trust. Nobody does. You've kept it confidential as I requested. James chuckled softly. This should be interesting. Send me the closing details. Second call went to my real estate attorney, Patricia Chen, who'd helped me with some rental properties I'd quietly purchased using trust funds. Patricia, I need you at a closing, and I need you to bring documentation. What kind of documentation? Trust papers, deed verification, title history, the works. Sounds like someone's trying something creative. My cousin's trying to flip my property without realizing I own it free and clear through a trust. Patricia laughed. Oh, this will be educational. I'll prepare everything. The closing was scheduled at Coastal Title Company, a firm Marcus had used before. He'd specifically requested them, probably figured they'd push the deal through quickly. I didn't tell anyone I was bringing attorneys. The day of closing arrived. Marcus had organized it like a celebration. He'd invited Uncle Robert, Aunt Linda, even my mother. Moral support for the big decision. He'd texted me. Really, he wanted witnesses to his success. I drove separately and arrived exactly at 2 p.m. The title company's office was in a modern building overlooking the marina. Sleek glass and chrome, expensive art on the walls, the kind of place that handles million-dollar transactions daily. Marcus was already in the conference room with the family when I walked in. He wore a suit, had his leather portfolio out, looked every bit the successful real estate investor. There he is. Marcus stood, shook my hand like we were closing a corporate merger. Ready to get this done. Ready, I said quietly. My mother hugged me. It's for the best, sweetie. You'll feel so much better once this weight is off your shoulders. Aunt Linda patted my arm. Marcus will take good care of the property. It's staying in the family, in a way. Uncle Robert just nodded at me, already looking at Marcus with pride. The settlement officer, Margaret Reynolds, entered with a stack of files. Mid-50s, gray suit, reading glasses on a chain, 25 years in title work, according to the credentials on the wall. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. Mr. Marcus Thompson, purchasing through Thompson Holdings LLC, and Mr. David Mitchell, selling the property at 847 Ocean View Drive. That was me, David Mitchell. Quiet, struggling, supposedly desperate David. Marcus spread out his paperwork. Everything's in order. We're doing a cash purchase, $500,000. My financing is confirmed. He glanced at me. This is going to change your life, David. Get you back on your feet. Margaret went through the preliminary documents. Purchase agreement, title search results, closing disclosure, standard procedure. Then she paused, frowned slightly at her computer screen. I need to verify something, she said, fingers moving across her keyboard. The title search shows. This is interesting. Marcus leaned forward. Problem. The property ownership structure. It's showing as trust held. My mother tensed. Trust? What does that mean? Marcus waved dismissively. Probably some old paperwork from when his grandmother died. David inherited it. That's already resolved. Margaret's frown deepened. No, this is an active trust. Irrevocable trust established in 2008, with specific provisions. She looked at me. Mr. Mitchell, You're listed as trustee and sole beneficiary. Yes, I said calmly. Marcus's smile faltered. So what? He can still sell. He's the owner. Technically the trust owns the property. Mr. Mitchell has authority to sell as trustee, but there are disclosure requirements. Margaret clicked through more screens. The trust documentation should have been provided during our title examination. I have copies, I said, reached into my bag, pulled out a folder. That's when James Morrison walked into the conference room. 62 years old, gray hair, three-piece suit, the kind of attorney who'd been handling complex estates since before Marcus was born. James Morrison, representing the Mitchell Family Trust. I'm the estate attorney who established the trust for Mrs. Eleanor Mitchell in 2008. I've been managing it since her passing. Marcus stared. Who is this? My attorney, I said simply. Your attorney. Marcus's voice rose slightly. You don't have attorney money. You can barely make rent. James set his briefcase down, pulled out documents. Miss Reynolds, I believe you'll need these for your closing file. Complete trust documentation, including the original establishment papers, amendment history, and current beneficiary status. Margaret took the papers, started reading. Her expression changed as she processed the information. Aunt Linda looked confused. I don't understand. What's happening? Patricia Chen arrived next. 38, sharp black suit, carrying a leather document case. She'd made partner at her firm by age 35. Patricia Chen, real estate attorney for Mr. Mitchell. I have additional documentation regarding the property. Marcus stood up. This is ridiculous. We have a simple purchase agreement. David wants to sell. I'm buying. Why are there suddenly lawyers? Because, Patricia said calmly, setting down her case. Your purchase agreement is based on incomplete information about the property's value and ownership structure. She pulled out a fresh market analysis. Current fair market value of 847 Ocean View Drive is $850,000, based on 3 comparable sales in the past 60 days. She slid the paper across to Margaret. Your offer of $500,000 represents a 41% discount from market value. The room went silent. Uncle Robert found his voice first. $850,000. Marcus's face flushed. Those comps are inflated. Beach properties are volatile right now. Patricia pulled out another document. Title history shows the property has been held in the Mitchell Family Trust since 2008. 0 mortgage, 0 liens, property taxes paid automatically from trust funds. She looked at Marcus. Did you know about the trust when you made your offer? I knew his grandmother left him the house. Did you know about the trust fund that pays all expenses? Marcus said nothing. James spoke up. The Mitchell Family Trust currently holds assets valued at approximately $2.3 million. It generates roughly $12,000 monthly in dividend income. The beach house is one asset among several, all professionally managed. My mother's hand went to her mouth. $2 million. The trust was established to provide long-term financial security for Mrs. Mitchell's descendants. James continued. David, as sole beneficiary and trustee, has complete access to these funds, and has been managing the trust responsibly for 2 years. Aunt Linda looked at me like she'd never seen me before. You have $2 million. The trust does, I said. Grandmother built it over 40 years. Marcus was gripping the edge of the table. You lied. You said you had credit card debt. I have a credit card I use for expenses, I said. I never said I couldn't pay it off. You said you were struggling with rent. I said my job barely covers my rent. It doesn't. The trust income covers my living expenses. I just never clarified that. Margaret was still reading through the trust documents. Mr. Mitchell, why are you selling the property? The trust appears to cover all expenses. I'm not selling, I said simply. The room erupted. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. We have a contract. We have a purchase agreement, Patricia corrected, which can be voided if there's evidence of fraud, misrepresentation, or if the seller was under duress. Duress. I was helping him. You told him the bank was going to take the property. That was false. You said he couldn't afford the taxes. Also false. You pressured him repeatedly in front of family members, creating social pressure. Patricia pulled out her phone. I have several text messages where you told him this was his last chance to avoid financial ruin. James added, There's also the matter of the purchase price. Offering $500,000 for a property worth $850,000 to a person you believed was financially desperate could constitute financial exploitation. Marcus turned to Uncle Robert. Dad, are you hearing this? He's trying to back out of a legal contract. Uncle Robert was staring at me. You let us think you were broke. I let you think what you wanted to think, I said. I never asked for money. I never asked for help. Marcus offered to help me, and I listened to his offer. While secretly planning this ambush with lawyers, I invited my attorneys to a closing. That's standard practice for any significant real estate transaction. Aunt Linda shook her head. This is cruel. Marcus was trying to help you, and you humiliated him. Help me. I looked at Marcus. You were planning to make $350,000 profit by flipping my property. You told me the house was worth $500,000 when you knew it was worth nearly double. You pressured me weekly, used family gatherings to corner me, and specifically chose a closing date and title company that would rush things through. Margaret nodded slowly. Mr. Thompson, did you conduct your own market analysis before making the offer? Marcus's jaw tightened. I knew the neighborhood. Did you know the current market value was $850,000? He said nothing. Patricia leaned forward. You're a real estate investor. You flip properties. You absolutely knew the market value. You saw an opportunity to exploit someone you believed was financially vulnerable. He's family, Marcus said weakly. Which makes it worse, James replied. Elder financial exploitation is a serious issue. In this case, exploiting a younger family member's perceived financial distress for personal profit. Margaret closed her laptop. I can't proceed with this closing. The purchase agreement was based on incomplete disclosure and possible misrepresentation of the property's value. The seller's attorney has indicated intention to withdraw from the contract, and there are questions about whether the buyer conducted adequate due diligence. Marcus turned to me. You planned this. You wanted to embarrass me. I wanted to see how far you'd go, I said. You could have offered fair market value. You could have been honest about the property's worth. You could have asked if I actually needed to sell instead of assuming I was desperate. Everyone thought you were broke, because I don't brag about money. I don't drive a luxury car, or wear expensive clothes, or post about my investments on social media. I live quietly. That's not the same as being poor. My mother was crying softly. David, why didn't you tell us? All this time we worried about you. Because the minute people know you have money, everything changes. People start asking for loans. Family starts expecting handouts. Friends treat you differently. I looked around the room. Grandmother knew that. That's why she made the trust confidential. That's why she set it up to protect me. Uncle Robert stood. Come on, Marcus. We're leaving. The contract is void, Patricia said firmly. My client will not be selling the property. If you attempt to force the sale through litigation, we'll countersue for attempted fraud and file a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission about your business practices. James handed Margaret a card. Please update your records to reflect that any future transactions involving this property must include notice to myself and Miss Chen. We're the attorneys of record for the Mitchell Family Trust. Margaret took the card, noted. Mr. Thompson, I'm returning your earnest money deposit. This closing is cancelled. Marcus grabbed his portfolio. You think you're so smart. You're just a trust fund baby who never worked for anything. Grandmother worked for 40 years to build that trust, I said quietly. She cleaned houses, took in sewing, saved every penny. She built something to protect her family. I'm honoring that by not letting you exploit it. He stormed out. Uncle Robert followed, not looking back. Aunt Linda hesitated at the door. You could have just told him no. You didn't have to humiliate him like this. I told him I needed to think about it. He kept pushing. I told him I wasn't sure. He involved the whole family to pressure me. I never signed anything until today, and I brought my attorneys to protect my interests. That's not humiliation. That's due diligence. She left without responding. My mother stayed wiping her eyes. I feel so foolish. All those times I worried about you. I touched her hand. Mom, I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I needed to live my own life, not as the rich grandson. I needed to know who my real friends were, which family members cared about me versus caring about money. And now you know. Now I know. Margaret finished her paperwork. Mr. Mitchell, the title company will send you a formal closing cancellation notice within 3 business days. Your property remains titled to the Mitchell Family Trust. Is there anything else you need? No, thank you. I appreciate your thoroughness. She nodded. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. I've seen too many people pressured into bad deals by family members. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let them show their true intentions. James and Patricia walked out with me. In the parking lot, James shook my hand. Your grandmother would be proud. She built that trust specifically to prevent this kind of exploitation. I know. I read her letters. Patricia smiled. That was the most professional property closing ambush I've ever participated in. Congratulations on standing your ground. Thank you both for being here. That's what we're paid for. James got into his car. Call me if Marcus tries anything else. I doubt he will, but family members can be unpredictable when money's involved. I drove back to the beach house that evening, let myself in, walked out to the deck. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky orange and pink, the same view my grandmother had loved for 25 years. My phone buzzed. Text from my younger sister Jessica. Mom told me what happened. Why didn't you tell me about the trust? I called her instead of texting back. Hey, she answered. So you're secretly rich. I'm comfortable. There's a difference. Mom said Marcus tried to rip you off. Marcus saw an opportunity and took it. I just made sure he didn't succeed. Jessica was quiet for a moment. Are you mad at all of us for assuming you were broke? No, I let people assume. That was my choice. But why? I watched the waves roll in. Because grandmother told me something before she died. She said money reveals people's true character. She said the trust was a gift, but it was also a test. To see who loved me for me, and who saw me as an opportunity. That's kind of sad, maybe, but it's honest. So what now? Are you going to tell everyone, eventually, on my terms? Not because someone tried to force my hand. For what it's worth, I would have loved you either way. I know, Jess. That's why you're the first person I'm telling directly. We talked for another 20 minutes. She asked about the trust, the properties, how I'd managed to keep it secret for 2 years. I told her about the separate bank accounts, the modest lifestyle, the careful boundaries. When we hung up, I sat on the deck, until full dark. The ocean sounded peaceful, constant, unchanging. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. You made me look like a fool in front of my father. I typed back. You did that yourself. I just stopped you from stealing $350,000 from family. It's business. You would have agreed to the price if I hadn't pushed. Which means you were counting on me being desperate enough to accept a lowball offer. That's exploitation, not business. We're done. Don't expect any help from this family again. I never expected help. I expected honesty. You chose differently. He didn't respond after that. Over the next week, the family dynamics shifted. Uncle Robert called once, asked stiffly if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner. I declined politely. Aunt Linda sent a brief email saying Marcus was taking time to process everything. My mother visited the beach house, walked through the rooms, touched grandmother's furniture. She was so proud of this place, Mom said, saved for 12 years to buy it. I know. That's why I'm keeping it. Marcus could have helped you manage it. If you just told him the truth from the start. Mom, Marcus didn't want to help me manage it. He wanted to flip it for profit. There's a difference. She nodded slowly. I suppose I wanted to believe he was being generous. He might have been, if the numbers were different. But $350,000 profit, that's not generosity. That's opportunism. 2 weeks after the failed closing, I got a call from Margaret at the title company. Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to give you a heads up. Marcus Thompson filed a complaint with our office claiming we improperly canceled the closing. Did he? Yes, we've reviewed the file. His complaint was rejected. The closing was properly canceled due to incomplete disclosure and questions about the purchase agreement's validity. But I thought you should know he's still pursuing this. Thank you for letting me know. Also, 3 other people have called asking about the property. I think Marcus has been telling people it's available. I smiled. It's not. That's what I told them. Just wanted to confirm. I hung up and looked out at the ocean. The property was worth $850,000 today. In 5 years, probably over $1 million. In 10 years, maybe $1.5 million. Marcus had tried to buy it for $500,000 and flip it immediately. He would have made generational wealth from a single transaction, exploiting a family member he believed was desperate. Instead, he walked away with nothing but a reputation problem, and a father disappointed that his son's business acumen turned out to be taking advantage of vulnerable people. The beach house stayed in the Mitchell family trust. I visited every other weekend, kept it maintained, watched the property value increase, and nobody in the family asked me for money, because they knew I had attorneys who protected the trust my grandmother built. Sometimes the best protection is simply letting people reveal their own character.